I think one of the nice things about being in different places is you can start to recognize like what's good and beautiful about this place and compare it to other places. Some of the time, comparison is the thief of joy, right? It doesn't always lead us to good things. But for me, Tucson specifically in Arizona is a very unique place. Um, there's a lot of culture, a lot of outdoor activities, great food scene, reasonable cost of living. You don't have to deal with winter. I mean, there's winter, right? But it's more like fall for normal people. There's no snow. You can get to the ocean in 4 to 6 hours. Um, so for me, the main negative is not being close to the ocean. But I've never been close to the ocean. Um, so I just think there are tons of wonderful things about Tucson specifically. Um, but the way we ended up there was meandering. Like, was never the first choice. Like, God has this unique theme in the Bible where it's not the oldest, right? It's the unlikely that is elevated and used to do great things. It's the younger brother. It's the younger twin. It's where's the king? It's got to be the son of Jesse. It's got to be the son of Jesse. No, it's the one that's out with the sheep. The last one you talk to, this is the one that I'm going to do great things with. So I met Tim Suddeth. The first ministry event I went to in Kirksville where I went to college, and I did performing arts in high school. And so we were in this group, and they were just getting to know me because I was a new student. They wanted to recruit to their club, and I'd said that I did show choir and performing arts, so musicals primarily. And Tim was in a swing dance club. So he's like, "Oh, you should join the swing dance club." And this other girl was in the collegiate show choir. She's like, "Oh, you should try out for the show choir." So like all of a sudden, it was like these two people I didn't know at all were like trying to invite me into something. I was like, I don't even know what I want to do yet. But what I did know is that I wanted to find people who shared my commitment to Jesus. And so I will go show up by myself. I had no friends. I didn't know anybody. But they were giving away food, and I knew at least it was semi-safe. So I went there. And so I met Tim at that point. He was already an upperclassman, so older. And he invited me into life, both of that ministry and then in another of the clubs that he was involved in. And throughout our time together in college, he was a wonderful friend. I was the best man in his wedding, honored to stand with him when he and his wife, Rachel, got married. I remember they had like a contentious relationship. And I remember saying like, "Oh, you know who would never work relationally is Tim and Rachel." I mean, oh man, like I don't even think they like each other. And I came home one day and they were like on the couch, like cuddling. And I was like, what's going on? This is very confusing to me. I didn't think you liked each other. And it seems like maybe you really like each other. I was unprepared for that sort of shift. But yeah, I mean, Tim and I have had a long ministry relationship, and his commitment to God was so high. His commitment to God and to our ministry was much higher than his commitment to classes. So he might get confused about what he had to do to pass a class, but he was never confused about how important God was and how important helping other people find their way to Jesus was. And so in many ways, Tim and I complement each other. I tend to lean towards like big ideas, vision, direction, like dreaming about things, like let's do great things for God together. And he leans towards like, well, let's develop the systems and the details and how that might be realistic instead of just something that you thought of. And so we began working together significantly, not just on a worship service, but on an outreach event that we did in college. And then went on to plan, eventually saying like, hey, the town that we are going to college in is only about 20,000 people. There's not much job opportunity. Most people who go to school here go somewhere else to work. This is not a place people stay. But what would it be like if we could do ministry somewhere in a town where people could stay, where they could find their way to Jesus in a campus ministry, they could discover grace-filled community and decide never to live without it again. And instead of just going back home, because that's something to do, we got to go somewhere, got to find a job somewhere, what would it be like to build a vibrant campus church somewhere? So instead of saying, hey, like, instead of just going home, maybe consider another option. What would it be like if we all moved somewhere that people could do graduate work, somewhere people could get jobs, and then continue in the community that's been so significant for us and begin to help other people embrace that sort of community for the rest of their lives. So we began this giant research project, effectively. We knew we were looking for primarily major universities in towns that were large enough that that you could stay if you wanted to. So we looked at, like Boulder, Colorado, or Albany, New York, or Columbia, Missouri, all over the place. And Tucson, Arizona, as well as Phoenix, Tempe, where ASU is, were on the list of things. And we had this big group that was doing this research project, and we kind of divided up the schools. And someone researched Tucson, and it got eliminated in the first round. Not good enough. Didn't meet the requirements. And what's interesting is I just am not sure that the person who was assigned Tucson did their assignment very well, because eventually we realized, no, the Tucson totally fits our requirements. How did this get dismissed so easily? So we actually looked at a bunch of options. We visited Boulder, Colorado. We visited Albany, New York, and we're considering both of those options. There were already Missions Door ministries there, so we thought maybe we would join a campus ministry and kind of birth a church from that. But in that process, there was a church in Tucson that reached out to our historic church partner, Venture Church Network, and said, hey, is there anyone who's interested in church planning or campus ministry or maybe Latino ministry? Because we could really use someone in Tucson. We have a parsonage they could live in. We'd love to find somebody who might be open to that call. And so they got touch base with Missions Door, and my dad reached out to me because he knew that we were in the middle. There were about 20 of us in this big research process trying to discern where God was leading us. And he said, hey, I'm not saying this is like Paul's Macedonian call, but maybe it's worth just checking out. It might be worth your time. So I flew down to Tucson and was picked up at the airport by Bob Lehman, who's the VP of missionary mobilization and care now, and drove me down to Tucson. And I try to be careful when I say that God spoke or that God was leading me. I think some of the time our discernment processes aren't great, or I had indigestion today, and maybe that's the Spirit. It's hard to sort through when God speaks in some instances. But I was there for about 12 hours, and just everything felt right. It was like, there's something about this. And so returned from that trip and told the team, guys, I know this is crazy, but I'm convinced God's calling us to Tucson. Every other place we'd gone, it had been the whole team. This was just two of us. And he met us there. And so I relocated to Tucson. Over the next couple of years, another about 18 people relocated to Tucson to start a church, including Tim and Rachel Sedeth, who are still with Missions Door. My brother and sister-in-law relocated. And Damascus Road I moved in 2004. We started having services on campus in, I think, the fall of 2006. And the rest is history to a degree. So we started meeting students and doing church with this population that's often overlooked, that is incredibly critical to the kingdom of God. Generally, I think culture argues that as the campus goes, so culture goes long term, that the big movements of culture start on college campuses and then trickle out as those people move out into the job force and gain influence and are trained in leadership. But there's no better time to meet people with the gospel than when people are making the biggest decisions about their lives and they have the autonomy to really sort through who they are apart from their families in a healthy way. There's a chance for them to encounter an intelligent and winsome presentation of the message of Jesus and who he really is, as opposed to the pop culture representations. And that's one of the things that's beautiful about being on the college campus. So our church is positioned to do that well. So that's what we've been doing for a long time.